The monsters from the 2025 Monster Manual look formidable from what we've seen so far. I mean, even just the art is a massive upgrade for inspiring dark and terrifying adventures. My name is Ben Byrne, and this is how the 2025 Monster Manual is going to make monsters formidable in your D&D campaign. Ancient dragon should feel impossibly powerful and awe-inspiring as an enemy in your D&D campaign. And I think this new Monster Manual, honestly, is really going to nail that vibe. There was very little that truly differentiated them. They all had their bite and claw attacks, they all had frightful presence, and they all had a flavor of breath weapon that needed to recharge on a set cooldown. Each dragon's actions were ultimately very samey and very limited. Looking at the new ancient gold dragon stats, we can see that it still rends with tooth and claw, but each turn it can also replace a rend attack with a different flavorful ability. Weakening breath massively debuffs fighters, barbarians, and paladins, and it's not on a cooldown anymore. So if your paladin recovers from the weakening breath effect, the dragon can just weakening breath a second time. Or the gold dragon can hurl radiant lightning with a level 4 guiding bolt at will, ensuring ranged attackers aren't safe and giving itself advantage on follow-up rend attacks. Its fire breath does still have a cooldown, but whilst waiting for the fire breath to recharge, the gold dragon could inflict 12d6 damage with flame strike instead. It can also casually banish a character each round with a legendary action, regardless of what else it's done on its turn. There's just so many tools in the dragon's tool belt. But more importantly than how many abilities the gold dragon has, is that each ability is tuned to the themes and story that you would tell with a gold dragon. Alongside power, gold dragons also embody virtue, honesty, and prosperity. A gold dragon doesn't want to fight, so it weakens and banishes its aggressors instead. It can cast Detect Magic and Zone of Truth in its quest for justice and integrity. You could also play a gold dragon as an authoritarian inquisitor. Your characters might carry a dangerous magical artifact as a key component to their quest. This artifact is corrupting you, like Sauron's ring, and if the gold dragon finds it, you will face the dragon's wrath. Can you survive such an interrogation? Though we haven't seen many other dragon stat blocks directly, what Jeremy Crawford and Wes Schneider have been describing is the unique nature of each dragon's abilities, which reflect why you would choose that specific dragon for your campaign. Though it's probably outdated now, the ancient green dragon stat block we saw last year can charm its foes. It can cast Modify Memory to control what you remember. This is a dragon type you would use if your villain is a master manipulator, and their schemes are as labyrinthine and ancient as the forest that they lair within. The ancient red dragon has been described as having a commanding presence ability, forcing its enemies to yield to its authority and power, because the red dragon embodies earth-shattering might, both in its physical strength and the strength of its authority. Its abilities will likely reflect how it will destroy those it cannot force into subservience. The themes of these different dragon types are also showcased in the new art. The green dragon swims unseen beneath a tiny boat of nervous adventurers. The red dragon towers above, filling the frame. Its malicious grin glows with fiery destruction, whilst armored soldiers flee from it in terror. I really think this new Monster Manual is going to provide a wider range of different dragon types to fulfill all sorts of narratives. The new Monster Manual looks like it'll add to how frightening you can make undead, because that's the core theme all undead creatures share: fear of death and fear of the dead. The art from the new book alone evokes the theme in the writhing, scorched bodies of the grave revenant and the emaciated body horror of the glowing specters. We haven't seen stat blocks for any incorporeal undead yet to know what's different, though they've said the Banshee has a table suggesting story ideas for featuring one in your campaign. And that's what makes for a great monster stat block, one that inspires a story or quest idea to build for your players. For example, call the Haunting Revenant. I really like this stat block because it's basically an adventure location that fights back, a twisted, haunted house that the locals know you should never go inside of. When your party arrives to cleanse the house, half of them may be drawn inside by the invitation action. The doors and shutters slam closed, locking them within. The characters outside try to batter and hack their way inside, whilst the earth surrounding the house is pushed aside and zombies clamber from their graves. Those invited inside try to escape, whilst the house pummels them with the object slam ability, and they're attacked by the specters of those who've previously died in the house. That would be a really memorable encounter for your campaign. And I feel similarly inspired just by seeing the artwork of the tangled corpses for the Grave Revenant. Without even seeing this thing's stats, I'm imagining a battlefield of slaughtered warriors rising to take revenge on the Knight Commander who ordered them into a senseless battle. Your party may have taken a quest from that old knight to slay this undead scourge, but you've discovered that he himself is responsible for the restless dead. Do you try to destroy the Grave Revenant or seek justice against the old knight to lay the Revenant to rest? With the wider variety of new undead stat blocks, especially those using the same kinds of creature like the Revenants, it feels like you'll be able to build thematically strong quests and campaigns. Choose Revenants if you want your quest to be about vengeance for past crimes, or choose different types of ghosts and incorporeal undead if you want your story to be about grief and trying to move on from trauma. Ghouls and ghasts, on the other hand, thematically embody hunger and moral corruption, but in a way that's more openly deplorable and revolting than a vampire. In 2014, ghouls could only ever rise to the level of minions of greater undead, but the 2024 Monster Manual promises entire adventures possibly based around ghouls. When I heard of the Ghast Gravecaller, a creature who tried to achieve lichdom but couldn't even manage that, I was reminded of the Flesh Eater courts from Age of Sigmar. Imagine a mid-tier villain who styles themselves as a courtly noble, a judge, or maybe a priest leading a congregation, but is utterly delusional in how cruel and disgusting they actually are. A villain whose followers aren't mere zombies or skeletons, but also hungering ghouls of different CR who feed on graveyards like maggots chewing through a corpse. Whilst you fight against the teeth and claws of a ravenous horde of putrid ghouls, their master throws spells at you from the back line. You can create encounters that feel thematically clear, but still mechanically diverse by using different stat blocks from the same creature type. Having a variety of vampire stat blocks in the new Monster Manual is fantastic news. The rich stories vampires offer make them among the most popular D&D monsters. But as I discussed in one of our oldest videos on vampires, one of the most important aspects to making them formidable as adversaries is the timing of when they appear. Jeremy and Wes have discussed how having similar monsters at different CR means your party can fight a Death Knight or a vampire at lower levels. But should you? Having a low CR vampire crawl around a random dungeon mid-campaign robs you from fully exploring how formidable you can make a vampire in your adventure. Instead, at low levels, your party may encounter a vampire familiar, a mortal servant to one or a coterie of vampires who appears as an omen of their master's imminent arrival. Perhaps a stranger arrives in your village to purchase property for a mysterious nobleman. A harmless enough occurrence, yet folk have started disappearing. The stranger has a fearful expression whenever questioned about their noble benefactor. And in this way you can build your vampire's reputation in the words and deeds of their familiar. This stat block gives your players an early villain to defeat, but preserves the dreadful gravitas of the vampire when the noble finally arrives to the campaign themselves. And you can also give the traits from this stat block, like the vampiric connection and the deathless agility, to other humanoid stat blocks to create different types of vampire familiar. Perhaps your vampire's familiar is a knight who completes quests for their master, or they're a warlock who draws their magic from a pact with a vampire. We've been promised new true vampire stat blocks as well, including the mid-tier Nightbringer and the high-tier Umbral Lord. We haven't seen those rules yet, but as someone who was admittedly disappointed with how low CR the 2014 vampire stat block was, I'm kinda hoping to have a truly deadly vampire sorcerer to throw at my players. Player characters got a significant power buff in D&D 2024, and it's worrying that monsters won't keep up with the new class features and weapon masteries. But the general quality of life changes in the 2024 Monster Manual look really promising, including that every monster we've seen so far has gotten a buff for the same CR. I was also worried about the artwork for the new Monster Manual, judging from the 2024 Player's Handbook, which was also chipper and upbeat. I guess I also get the giggles whenever I sell my soul, especially to this guy. But the artwork shown from the Monster Manual is truly an upgrade. The fiends are frightening, the undead are gothic, the fae whimsical, and the dragons are fearsome. Additionally, the creature type changes are ultimately an improvement, I think. A monster's creature type should reflect the types of stories you will tell using that monster. Kobolds represent a groveling submission to power, which complements the egotism that dragons embody. Therefore, it makes sense such creatures would be part of the same type and the same type of story. And look, not for nothing, but the Grim Hollow Monster Hunter class has received a huge buff, having way less creatures as humanoids and more creatures for the Monster Hunter to specialize in hunting. The Half Dragon stat block, which Pack Tactics previewed on his channel, showcases all of these mentioned quality of life improvements. Firstly, now it's a dragon, not a humanoid, and I actually had to go back and check and realize the old Half Dragon was humanoid. And look at how monstrous the Half Dragon art is. This is you, and this is the guy she tells you not to worry about. But the stat block also supports this new art. The new Half Dragon has almost double the hit points. It has 10 more feet of movement, and it has a 30-foot cone breath weapon instead of a kind of tiny 15-foot cone. It even has an extra ability for flavor called Leap, allowing it to spend 10 feet of its movement and a bonus action to jump 30 feet. That's not a game-breaking feature by any measure, but it gives you an idea of how the Half Dragon fights, pouncing at its foes on powerful legs to rend them with its claws. Just like the Gold Dragon banishes its foes and the Vampire Familiar is linked to its master, these flavorful abilities differentiate monsters with more than just numbers. If I dare be so bold, it feels like Wizards of the Coast have learned from how Kobold Press, MCDM, and Ghostfire Gaming make our monsters formidable by injecting them with flavorful abilities that differentiate them. And another feature possibly learned from third parties is the multiple stat blocks for monsters from the same type of monster at different CR to create a diverse but thematic encounter. Tome of Beasts featured different levels of ghouls, which I've often used, and Flea Mortals is famous for its large variety of goblins. The Grim Hollow Monster Grimoire includes enough varying Inquisitor stat blocks to hunt your heretical player characters for an entire campaign. In fact, if you want an arch villain for the mages in your party, click on this video to learn how to run the unyielding might of the Arcanist Inquisition. Or you can click on either of these videos to learn more about how to make dragons or vampires truly formidable threats in your campaign by using their mythology.